Do you trust the media?
No.
Certain ones, I do.
Can we believe the news and the information we read and hear every day? Okay, it's a question. It's time to wake up, okay? Because believe it or not, this country's media outlets, TV stations, radio reports, newspapers, magazines, and more are being largely used against us. They're being used to divide us, to misinform us, to take our rights and our country right out from under us. Okay, if you remember a couple of years ago, I did a presentation that I called Kidnapping Our Country's Christian Heritage. And I talked about a lot of what's been done. Well, much of it's been done through this way. Who is behind all this? Well, we'll begin to see. It's time for us to wake up, as I said. Time for them to wake up. What has been going on in our world affects us, and it's intertwined into everything throughout all aspects of our lives. This movie, by the way, has a lot of messages in it, believe it or not. It's not just a kid's film. We were asleep for too long while they took over our world and our minds. Okay, step by step, like going down the yellow brick road, right? With their distractions, we didn't notice what they've been doing to our health, our environment, our food, our education, our government, our media, our spirituality, our lives, and what they've been doing to our children. But shh, they'll never know what we have done. They don't wake up. And we toddled along, thinking that all was right with the world, like good people do. But beware of the road you travel and who you trust. Have you ever wondered if what you've been told is the truth? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, pulling the levers and acting like the great and powerful Oz. The Mockingbird Media is the purveyor and the deceiver. They are complicit in every evil happening, and they are deeply entrenched within every cultural mountain in our world. And it's time to end the Mockingbird Media. The deep state, have you heard of that? Mm-hmm. They don't want us to be free. To them, we're slaves, we're cattle, and deplorables. But we've found a way out, and it's time to wake up. All we have to do is stand up, and their little game is over. But first we have to recognize what's really going on, so we can delete the Mockingbird Media. Okay? Have you heard of Operation Mockingbird? Anybody heard of that? Okay. How about the deep state or shadow government? Those are some terms that have been thrown around. Yeah, the swamp. Drain the swamp. I will say right out that I support Donald Trump, our president. I believe he is really working hard to try to salvage what's left of our country, turn it around, put it back on the right track. That's why he talks about draining the swamp. He's talking about the deep state, the Illuminati, or cabal, if you will. Okay? Operation Mockingbird is the fact that the CIA and the deep state swamp have double agents in the media. Okay? Injustice has come to America through socialist propaganda, just as it did with the Jewish people who were overtaken by National Socialists during World War II, the Nazis. Okay? They used great deception, lies, and propaganda put together by treasonous puppet masters, you could call them. And we know what happened to Germany last century. Without a free press, honest media, free speech, and the right to bear arms and other freedoms, a country can quickly be overcome by pure evil. I've said this before, we think, oh, that can't happen here. not in the United States of America. Well, excuse me, it happened to every other single powerful country in the world last century. Every single top country, Germany, Japan, Russia, China, Italy, Turkey, they all fell because they trusted the wrong people. And we think it can happen to us. What is propaganda? Does the CIA engage in it? Who could be behind it? How has and how does this continue to affect people? America and the whole world. Well, propaganda befell the people, but they knew not. It's a famous saying, he who controls the media controls the minds of the public. Noam Chomsky said that. Another guy you might recognize, Jim Morrison, famous rock singer. His father was in the CIA. He said the same thing. He who controls the media controls the minds of the people. A couple famous CIA directors. William Colby said, the CIA owns anyone of any significance in the major media. Former CIA Director William Casey said, we'll know our disinformation program is complete once everything the American public believes is false. He came right out and said that, and that's basically Operation Mockingbird. Anderson Cooper of CNN was even an intern at the CIA. And this is a picture of his family. That's Anderson with his brother, who, by the way, committed suicide. That's their mother, Gloria Vanderbilt. And she's sitting on a bed there with a picture above it depicting satanic human sacrifice. He grew up in that environment. Operation Mockingbird is but one of many covert CIA operations that's been perpetrated on the people of the Republic of the United States of America. In fact, most big-name commentators in the news media all get these 4 a.m. talking points every day that they're supposed to report on. All right, they have what's called burner phones that they get each week. In other words, they use disposable cell phones to receive propaganda stories with talking points that we receive as news every day. And it's easy to prove to yourself, as you can go look at the news reports early in the morning that come out after 4 a.m. and see the exact same phrases being used in all the stories on any given topic, all day long. In the Washington Post, New York Times, and other print media. Then you'll hear it repeated on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, and even Fox News and local broadcasts. It's all propaganda from the deep state, and it's used to control our minds, what we think and believe. These are all stories here that came out 446, 454, 459, 507, 411, all on the same topic of Trump lawyer Michael Cohen says that his family, not the president, is his first loyalty. And they're all saying exactly the same thing, exactly the same thing. He's not loyal to Trump, he's loyal to his family, they all say. All right, and there's many other instances you can find at any time. One example was Hurricane Harvey in Houston a few years ago. The deep state hates Donald Trump, okay, because he's trying to change things. He's trying to drain the swamp, which, by the way, he didn't have to do. He was a very popular person before he ran for president. Nobody ever called him a racist. He had everything he could ever possibly want and need. Now look what he has to put up with. But he went down to see victims of this hurricane and help pass out food and do other things to the flood victims. But then in the news reports the next day, they were all saying the same 4 a.m. talking point. Trump showed a lack of empathy. A lack of empathy, a lack of empathy, a lack of empathy, lack of empathy. Every news story in every paper and every TV station showed him passing out food with a lack of empathy. Lack of empathy, lack of... So, you know, the English language is very complex. It's very big, and to use the exact same words in every media place about the same thing all the time is obviously propaganda. We'll see another example of that in a little bit. But fake news is another word for propaganda, right? Okay, we've been hearing that lately. Fake news is nothing new in this country. In fact, in 1880, it was an issue. This is a quote from John Swinton, who was a New York journalist. He made these remarks at a news media banquet where he was the guest of honor. He stood up and said, "There is not one of you who dares to write your honest opinions. And if you did, you know beforehand that it would never appear in print. I'm paid weekly for keeping my honest opinion out of the paper that I'm connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you who would be so foolish as to write honest opinions would be out on the streets looking for another job. If I allowed my honest opinions to appear in one issue of my paper, before 24 hours my occupation would be gone." He said, "The business of the journalist is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And what folly is this, toasting an independent press? We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes." 1880, he was saying that. This is a book called The Killing of Uncle Sam that I read, The Demise of the United States of America, by Rodney Brown and Paul L. Williams. You could get it if you like, but it gives a lot of details about the New World Order and how it controls the media and runs the CIA. It goes on, has a lot of examples of fake news over the years. I won't go into a lot of it, but you know, in that talk, a couple talks about evolutionism that I've done, I show how it was brought into the media, and that's what this talks about, Darwinism being introduced and the idea of a master race and everything through the media and the churches. This is about Rhodes Scholars, which was something that's awarded to people who they wanted to become influential, like Bill Clinton. He was a Rhodes Scholar, and many others. World War I was largely started and kept going through fake news. At least our part of it was. Which makes me angry because my grandfather lied about his age when he heard what was going on over there and went to fight in Germany. And it basically was staged terrorism, a false flag event. An incident had to be created to provoke the American people to abandon the stance of isolationism, stay out of it, and enter the war. So they created an event called with the Lusitania being sunk by a German sub when it was carrying 6 million rounds of ammunition to Britain. They didn't tell us that. And other things that I won't go into all of it right now, but it's in this book and others if you want to read it. But World War I was produced by fake news, at least our part of it. There were not babies in Belgium being mutilated or Catholic nuns being hacked apart like they were reporting in the news here at the time. All right, millions were sent to their deaths because they believed what they read in the newspapers is the point. World War II had a lot of fake news and propaganda going on with it. All you got to do is watch some Bugs Bunny cartoons. You can see that. Rocky and Bullwinkle, how about them? fearless leader and Pennsylvania and all the stuff going on there. There's a lot happening in that. But there was much more going on behind the scenes with them and the Nazi socialists. Okay? But the way it ended up was, however it really did end, and that is not very clear. One thing did come from it that had to do with this country, and that was called Operation Paperclip. Have you ever heard of that? All right, well, it was the fact that Nazi scientists and intelligence agents were brought to the USA after the war to help develop our technology and secret CIA agencies. Meet the Nazis that were employed by the US government, but deemed too important to try at the Nuremberg trials. Werner von Braun is one famous one. Some say Joseph Mengele, the angel of death, and others. It was even partly announced in the media at the time, German scientists recruited by the US. They didn't mention all the SS and Gestapo agents too, but they were part of it. In fact, they helped to start the CIA. September 1, 1948, the OPC, Office of Policy Coordination, merged with the Office of Special Operations into a combined directorate which became known as the Clandestine Services of the Central Intelligence Agency. And basically the Germans who came over after the war helped with that. Guys like Alan Dulles became one of their first CIA directors. Cord Meyer, Richard Helms, Frank Wiesner, Philip Graham, and a couple others that maybe I'll mention another time. But there's been fake news all along. Through the 1950s, there were 3,000 salaried and contract CIA agents engaged in propaganda of one kind or another in this country and other places. They've manipulated our democracy, our republic, through the mainstream media. See, in the beginning, Mockingbird, which was Operation Mockingbird, a CIA operation that was led by Frank Wiesner and those other guys I mentioned, their main focus was to interact behind the scenes with major media outlets and get reporters on the CIA payroll. The agency had a lot of them in their pockets. This has all of them. ABC, CBS, NBC, Time, Life, Newsweek, Associated Press, UPI, Reuters, on and on. Okay? In the beginning of the 1970s, it said that the CIA had over 1,000 journalists working on secret assignments. So we can go in and on with that, but it was similar to Soviet-style journalism, like the newspaper Pravda over there. But it continued into the 1960s here. In fact, at that time, the CIA even admitted that they employed some 40 journalists who doubled as undercover contacts. But even that was a lie, because we found out there were hundreds at the time. And recently, JFK files were released. We haven't heard a whole lot about that in the media, but a lot of information has come out. For example, they had hit lists and people that they didn't like JFK. See, John F. Kennedy was trying to do some of the things that in his time that I see Donald Trump doing now, like changing the currency, making it backed by gold again, trying to get some of the corruption out of the intelligence agencies. And we know what happened to him. There's a lot of information here about what the CIA said they were doing at the time. This was all released in the JFK reports, basically, that they had editors who would review text in the media and change the facts to suit their agenda, editors who stepped in and defended and shifted the focus, reporters on the CIA payroll, lots of stuff here. Falsification of historical events, disinformation campaigns, it goes on and on. And we had a great man come in and try to make things better. They didn't like what he was doing and a couple of the things that I said. And it was confirmed in the JFKI files just last year that we learned that they lied to us for over 50 years, saying that Operation Mockingbird was a conspiracy theory, that the CIA was not involved in JFK's assassination. Well, do you know that the term conspiracy theory was a CIA term that they made up in 1967 to keep people from finding out about the truth of the Kennedy assassination and Operation Mockingbird? They wanted you to believe the Warren Commission report. That, by the way, was led by Allen Dulles, who we just saw a few minutes ago. He was a leader of the CIA who JFK fired because he felt he couldn't trust him. And then he was put in charge of the Warren Commission to report on what happened to the president. This talks about it. The term conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA. The term conspiracy theory was developed by the CIA as a means of undercutting critics of the Warren Commission's report that President Kennedy was killed by Oswald. And the use of this term was heavily promoted in the media by the CIA. We still hear it today all the time. Oh, conspiracy theorists, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory. Anybody who doesn't believe the official narrative or being told about something is a conspiracy theorist, and they start getting followed and looked at by the CIA and the FBI and others. So this talks about that too. Fake news continued on through the 1970s. Carl Bernstein on CBS came out and talked about it, saying CBS was unquestionably the CIA's most valuable broadcasting asset. And he goes on talking more about that there. Time to go into it all. Fake news in the 1980s. I already mentioned this. CIA Director William Casey said, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." In the 90s, people like Phil Donahue and Jesse Ventura were speaking out against the first Gulf War, and they got taken off the air. I knew Phil Donahue in the 1980s. I worked at WGN TV in Chicago, where they filmed the Donahue Show. I used to meet his guests and bring them to meet with him. I met people like Bob Newhart, Tim Conway, Bo Derek, Lonnie Anderson, Alan Alda, Bill Murray, people like that.
John
And-
Denver? John Denver?
No, I don't remember him.
I know he was on there.
Probably, yeah. But I knew him, but he moved to New York City and got really popular until he started criticizing George Bush and the Gulf War. Canceled. Never heard of him again. Jesse Ventura, too, he got taken off the air and paid to be not on the air, actually. And the fake news was largely part of September 11, 2001 and everything that happened after that. Weapons of mass destruction was not true. A lot of false facts about the perpetrators and the terrorism involved. I could go on and talk about that a lot, but not today, okay? But right after that, what was put into place? The Patriot Act, okay, which had nothing to do with patriots. It was about spying on the American people. Joe Biden is proud about saying how he wrote most of that, He talks about that, or has pretty often, but it's about spying and looking at everything in people's lives. If you remember Edward Snowden, he came out and said, you need to know what these people are doing. They're spying on everything you do. And they tried to kill him. He had to run for his life. He's still running for his life. I think he's in Russia right now. This is just a big diagram of what's called the American Empire and its media. The thing I want you to see is the Council of Foreign Relations there, right in the middle at the top. Anybody heard of that? Council on Foreign Relations? Well, it kind of runs everything, and we don't hardly know it. I read a book by investigative journalist and historian whose name I like. His name is Mordecai Zemberg. He had this to say about the Council on Foreign Relations. What exactly is the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR? Many Americans know almost nothing about this organization. Yet this organization has dominated this country's politics, the press, and the economy for decades. Representative John Rarick once said, the CFR, dedicated to one world government, financed by a number of the largest tax-exempt foundations, and wielding such power and influence over our lives in the area of finance, business, labor, military, education, and mass communication media, should be familiar to every American concerned with good government and with preserving and defending the U.S. Constitution and our free enterprise system. Yet, the nation's right to know machinery, the news media, usually so aggressive in exposure to inform our people, remain conspicuously silent when it comes to the CFR, its members, and their activities. The CFR is the establishment, the deep state. Not only does it have influence and power in key decision-making positions at the highest levels of government to apply pressure from above, but it also finances and uses individuals and groups to bring pressure from below, to justify the high-level decisions for converting the United States from a sovereign constitutional republic into a servile member of a one-world dictatorship. And we can maybe see and feel some of that happening. He continues, says a lot more about people involved. Brian Williams is a member of the CFR, so is Katie Couric. Here's some other names: Barbara Walters, Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, Jim Lehrer, Leslie Stahl, Tony Snow, Daniel Pipes, Charles Krautheimer, the late. In fact, the CFR owns and controls the television stations, radio stations, and newspapers, such as ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, PBS, New York Times, Washington Post, U.S. News and World Report, Newsweek, on and on. Well, 2016, Operation Mockingbird actually became legalized. They made it legal to perform propaganda in the media before the election happened. So I think that's what Donald Trump was referring to when he started talking about fake news. Articles on Hillary's emails and WikiLeaks were on CBS and censored. It goes on and on here. There's more. This talks about the 4 a.m. talking points that I mentioned. And I was going to hook up the audio, but I wasn't able to do that. But I want to play a clip for you about that, because I want you to see again some of these examples of talking points. The exact same words being used in reports, in news broadcasts, and not only on the mainstream national media, but in every single little news media, TV station all over the country too. And here, this is about that. You should be able basically hear it from here.
Think ahead, Lee.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We're extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CS4 News produces.
But
Plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish the same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false news
has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
There's a reason why they call them talking heads, and they're all pretty good at reading, aren't they?
Think ahead, Lee.
Well, what happens when 90% of the media is controlled or owned by just 6 corporations? What happens when those same corporations are operated and controlled by a political ideology? What happens when the news is no longer free from bias, or it's no longer independent, no longer trustworthy? What happens when the news simply becomes an extension of a particular political party? Does fact become fiction? Does fiction become fact? And there's more and more could go on and say about this. How does the average person who is under constant financial stress, by design, find time to research and discern fact versus fiction? The majority of people are more prone to believe someone in power sitting behind a big brand news name. Do people in the human psyche tend to follow the majority mainstream viewpoint in fear of being isolated and or shunned? More and more questions here that can and should be asked. But we interrupt this program to control the narrative. In fact, Operation Mockingbird is all about saying, we will tell you what to believe.
Shalom.
Shalom to
Shalom.
you.
Very interesting.
Thank you. You
Play
got
the rest of it
most
next
I
week.
thought you would.
Shalom.
Shalom. God bless. And ask yourself why. You know, why would this happen? Why would control over these institutions and organizations allow for the mass control of a population's viewpoint on any desired topic? Why were violent terror organizations such as Antifa immediately created and funded after the 2016 election? Why are these organizations tasked with immediate shutdown of anything that is pro-President Trump and any events? And it goes on and on, asks lots of questions, but basically it comes down to suggesting that the whole COVID-19 thing was actually not just a pandemic, but a plandemic, they call it, with planned riots, planned fires, lots of things happening to create chaos and fear everywhere so that people would not go to the polls to vote. They do it by mail, which can be easily corrupted and become fraudulent, which has been fixed in the electronic polling things, and they know that, so they've been trying to change the way the voting goes. And it's our job to fight it, because these people want us divided, okay? Divided by religion, divided by sex, divided by race, divided by political party, divided by political class, divided by class. And they're in both parties, by the way. It's not just one party. It's ideology, though, that's involved. Because when we're divided, we pose no threat to their control. Free thought ceases to exist in many cases. And to me, this is where we pretty much find ourselves now. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. Again, not to burst anyone's bubble, but we need to kind of burst our bubble and start waking up and questioning the things we're told. And when we look and hear these people saying things, it's not always the truth. So much censorship going on right now. But fortunately, God's stepped in with a plan. He is in control. And I really believe that we're moving in the right direction. There's a lot of really bad stuff going on behind the scenes that we're not really being told about yet. It's starting to come out little by little, and the mainstream media is going to resist reporting on it until they have no choice. I think over the next several weeks and months, year or two, we're going to hear lots of it, including 9/11 and worse stuff. But one of the things that has happened, and this is Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump was asked to run for president by a group of military intelligence men, generals and admirals, who've been basically working on what John F. Kennedy was trying to do when he was assassinated. They spent decades putting together a plan to try to overthrow these people. And they brought in Donald Trump to be their front man on it. And I really see that as what's happening. And they're trying to end the evil and the mind control that's been happening in our country for too long. He said recently the storm has arrived. And I think he was talking about this. God sent us his trumpet. I talked about the trump of God a few weeks ago, and I was, not really referring to him at the time, but I do think that it applies to him as well. So I'll just finish by saying God bless America.